poses real national security threats to the United Kingdom. With all that in mind, the absence of engagement is just staggering, a dereliction of duty, because it means that, unlike our allies, we have not been standing up for our interests.
All right, viewers, on that note, we're shifting focus to more developments coming in. Authorities in Hong Kong have stated that they have arrested 13 people for suspected manslaughter in a probe into the city's deadliest fire in decades, pointing to substandard renovation materials for fueling a blaze that has claimed at least 151 lives. Hong Kong's chief executive, John Lee, has now stated that an investigation into those ascertained to be accountable is underway and that 13 arrests have been made by the police and another 12 by the corruption body as well. He's also announced an independent committee to investigate the fire. The leader has called for serious reform and has stated that he will ensure that justice is served. Listen in to his remarks.
I call for thorough investigation and serious reform. We will overcome the obstacles of vested interests, pursue accountability, regardless of who he or she is. We must uncover the truth, ensure that justice is served, let the deceased rest in peace, and provide comfort to the living. Therefore, while criminal and fire investigations are proceeding continuously, I will establish an independent committee to conduct comprehensive and in-depth review to reform the building work system and prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future.
Remember, viewers, the deadly blaze has now claimed over 150 lives. Up until now, 40 people are still reported to be missing. There's, of course, a lot of solidarity across the world pouring in for the people of Hong Kong who are grieving at the moment. Donations have also been pouring in. They've reached about $115 million at the moment. But at the same time, remember, this blaze had in fact claimed 151 lives at the Wang Fuk Court. It commenced on the last week itself. And we've been seeing calls from people of Hong Kong for accountability even as the probe is underway. We're now learning that 13 have been arrested up until now as far as probe into corruption allegations are concerned. Remember, the building materials that were used for these renovations are under scrutiny at the moment. But we've seen Mr. Lee, the leader, the CEO of Hong Kong, the chief executive, has stated that investigation into those ascertained to be accountable is underway at the moment. It's important to ensure that vested interests are overcome, that reform takes place in order to pursue accountability, and that justice is served for all of those people who've lost their loved ones. Let's in fact listen in once again to what Mr. Lee had to say.
I call for thorough investigation and serious reform. We will overcome the obstacles of vested interests, pursue accountability, regardless of who he or she is. We must uncover the truth, ensure that justice is served, let the deceased rest in peace, and provide comfort to the living. Therefore, while criminal and fire investigations are proceeding continuously, I will establish an independent committee to conduct comprehensive and in-depth review to reform the building work system and prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future.
In the meantime, authorities have stated that the investigation is focusing on substandard renovation materials, faulty fire systems and earlier complaints from residents as well. Meanwhile, remember, thousands have been displaced from the 7 damaged tower blocks, even as efforts to rebuild the daily routines in temporary homes are underway. There's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of grief as well that has spread across Hong Kong and beyond as well. In fact, security officials have stated that some people fear suspicion of using this tragedy for political aims. But of course, we've seen the chief executive made it very clear that vested interests will be overcome, reforms will be carried out to pursue accountability, and that justice is served as well. Of course, in the meantime, we've learned that 13 people have been arrested so far in the fire that has claimed 151 lives. Remember, 40 people are still missing at the moment. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to further developments coming in. China and Japan are issuing different accounts of a maritime incident near the disputed Senkaku Islands. Confrontation involved their coast guards and a Japanese fishing vessel entering the area early this morning. China says that the Japanese fishing vessel illegally entered its own territorial waters, which it refers to as the Tiaoyu Islands. China has added that its coast guard then removed the vessel, claiming that the Senkaku Islands is Chinese territory. Meanwhile, Japan's Coast Guard has described a different sequence of events, stating that 2 Chinese Coast Guard ships approached the Japanese fishing vessel early this morning, and Japanese patrol vessels then expelled the Chinese vessels from the area. This incident, of course, follows other recent activities in the region. In mid-November, China had claimed that its Coast Guard conducted routine patrols around the islands. This latest exchange now adds to an already tense environment between the two countries, as relations have been under strain since early November after comments were made by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, which indicated that a potential Chinese attack on Taiwan could prompt a military response from Tokyo. This, of course, escalated to the point where the Chinese Consul General in Osaka had then issued some rather, if I may say, horrific threats against the Japanese Prime Minister. With us on the broadcast this morning is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel. He is, of course, a former diplomat joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting developments. We do know that the Senkaku Islands has been a flashpoint between Japan and China. But considering the fact that ties have been strained to a different level now in the aftermath of Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks, what do you make of this particular incident? Do you think this was deliberately orchestrated to really test the response of the Japanese side? And of course, whether they would buckle down to pressure from Beijing?
My own understanding of what has happened is that it is, as you said, a deliberate effort to keep the pressure up from China on Japan and Japan on China. It is more like a political slugfest between the two at the present, because in Japan, the nationalistic feelings on the territorial integrity and ownership of the Senkaku Island is very high. At the same time, China is not going to give up its claim on Senkaku Island. It's a very old claim and very old territorial dispute between the two. Of course, Taiwan issue has aggravated the whole security metrics between Japan and China. But I don't think at present really either Japan or China would be very interested in taking it to the extreme of military confrontation. So my sense is that this will remain a political and security irritant, but that is where it will stop. Yeah.
Indeed. And in context of what we've also been seeing, the sort of escalating rhetoric, the export bans, it spilled over to the economic realm as well, with export bans being imposed by China as well, China warning its citizens not to travel to Japan. Japan issuing similar warnings as well. Where do you think this will really head? Because, you know, a lot of analysts are pointing out that at the end of the day, what we're seeing is Beijing really trying to, you know, test how Sanae Takaichi is reacting, because we all know she's been a China hawk for a very long time, even before she's taken, you know, oath as the Japanese Prime Minister. So where do you see this heading?
Absolutely, Priya. I'm so happy that you have done your research on this. And it's quite true, really. The Prime Minister at the present is a China hawk, and her political popularity in Japan is really deriving out of this hawkish attitude on China. And therefore, I would say that to a large extent, it probably will increase its popularity in Japan. Now, the ban from China on import of certain elite things from Japan, tariff sanctions, etc., that will happen. China will put pressure on Japan. I think Japanese economy is in a position to withstand those pressures, will have negative impact, but nothing of the kind that would make Japan buckle up under the pressure, really. So I would imagine that the tensions will rise, both economical areas as well as political and defense, but it will be an interesting play, really, between the two. And you see, a lot really depends upon USA. The kind of attitude that the USA takes on the whole issue. USA and Japan have a security partnership. And therefore, in case of any threat to Japan, the USA will be expected to come to defense of Japan. But will the USA do that, or what will USA advise Japan? Will they advise Japan to back out or stay calm? Because Trump is very interested in building a relationship with China. We have seen that now. So it's a very interesting play, as I said earlier. Let us watch and watch. Let us see and watch what happens. But I wouldn't be really alarmed by the kind of situation that is developing in the East China Sea.
Absolutely, you did mention Donald Trump. He did you know, hold phone calls with both Sanae Takaichi as well as you know, Xi Jinping. Recently itself, he's been trying to push the G2. Interestingly, we have seen you know, the administration be a little more cold towards the Taiwanese. There was in fact one instance in which their vice president was supposed to head to a Latin American country, and America did not allow its airspace to be used as well. So all of this is building up to something quite interesting. I request you, sir, to stay on with us. We're tracking some other very crucial developments. The European Union has now formally terminated a long-running dispute with China at the World Trade Organization, which is centered on Beijing's alleged coercion of Lithuania in 2021. Now, according to a statement circulated to WTO members, the bloc has emphasized that it was abandoning the case, considering the key objectives behind this dispute have been met and relevant trade has now resumed. This case had risen after Lithuania permitted the opening of a controversially named quote-unquote Taiwanese representative office in Vilnius. Soon after the office was opened, Lithuanian exporters found they could no longer ship products to mainland China, and the country's details had been wiped from official Chinese customs system. Now, the virtual wipeout led to the European Commission to launch a case against China at the WTO. Meanwhile, China has claimed that Chinese people just did not want to buy goods from the Baltic country, which had made concerted efforts to grow ties with Taipei. Stay with us on the broadcast is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goyal. Interesting developments as far as this particular case is concerned. EU has now terminated this dispute. We do know that the EU is also trying to ink its own trade agreement with China. Interestingly, it also hosted the Taiwanese vice president recently, something which has not gone down well with Beijing. Do you think then this is some sort of some sort of an olive branch that the EU is now extending to China in terms of letting go of this particular case to make sure that the trade deal is catalyzed?
Quite right, really speaking, and therefore I think it was expected long time ago that EU eventually, in the interest of its own agreement with China, would sooner or later withdraw from the case from the WTO. It has done now. I do not know if Lithuania is actually happy with the EU stance that they have taken. But in the larger scheme of things, when they want an agreement with China and Taiwan, is again something that, if you remember that if Taiwan has depended upon security agreement with the USA and the European countries really. So European Union will not abandon Taiwan simply because of technology imports also. Taiwan is an important source of technology. And Taiwan is also an important link in terms of connectivity into the area. So I don't think EU can abandon Taiwan, even though if it comes to the crunch, they probably will bow down to the pressure from China, even in the case of Taiwan. And what has happened was actually long expected, that they will eventually give in to the pressure of China, and it has happened. Yes.
Indeed. As far as the EU is concerned, considering the fact that they're still in talks, do you think China will now accept this gesture by the EU and resume its negotiations in a rather vigorous manner as well? Because, the US under Donald Trump, even though Trump has been, as I stated earlier, has been peddling the G2 narrative, he's been very, his strategic position at large and his policies have been rather flip-flopping. He is known for taking, 180-degree turns in an instant.
Yeah. Absolutely, Pia. I'm afraid what I think may not be the common view among experts, but the fact is that Europe is both economically and strategically at a weaker position now, both vis-a-vis China and vis-a-vis the USA. We have seen how Europe had to essentially accept Trump's positions even on Ukraine. Even though NATO is prepared to intervene in the case of Ukraine, but USA will not let it do. And therefore, Europe will have to import armaments from USA if they want to support Ukraine. So what I'm saying here is that European Union, if you look at the whole balance of forces, they probably will actually accept China for negotiations on the FTA, and Trump himself really would advise Europe to go soft on China. So on the whole balance, what we are seeing is really emergence of China both in Asia and in Europe, in Pacific as well as Antarctic, as a major force challenging the USA. And we should see more developments in that respect in coming future.
All right, sir, requesting you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other very crucial developments. We're now learning that Tajik authorities and the Chinese embassy in Tajikistan have stated that 5 Chinese nationals have been killed and 5 others have been injured in the country in attacks launched from neighboring Afghanistan over the past week. Chinese embassy in Dushanbe, the capital of Tajikistan, has advised Chinese companies and personnel to urgently evacuate the border area. The embassy has added that Chinese citizens had been targeted in an armed attack close to the Afghan border last week. Earlier, it had emphasized that another border attack, which Tajik authorities stated had involved drones, in fact dropping grenades, had killed 3 Chinese citizens. Stay with us on the broadcast is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goyal. Interesting development, because we've seen such kind of attacks take place in Pakistan earlier, where the CPEC project is being carried out through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Tajikistan, we do know, is a part of the BRI as well. China does have its interests using Tajikistan as a gateway into Central Asia and then beyond into Europe as well. What do you make of these attacks against Chinese citizens? China is, of course, pointing fingers at Afghanistan, but what exactly is the larger game over here?
You see, beyond Pakistan was a different case altogether when Taliban government from Afghanistan, they were attacking on the border, KPK border as well, and they across the Durand line. There was a whole lot of political thing across into Tajikistan. I have not really read the news so far, and therefore speaking purely as a kind of an analyst, is going to be a different kind of a thing altogether. Tajikistan is part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yes.
China is very keen to develop both for connectivity and strategic approach into the north and towards both Arctic as well as to Europe. Tajikistan is an important step in the direction, and therefore what happens in Tajikistan is important to China in terms of its own political relationship networking in the area. My guess is that when Taliban fighters attacked Chinese across in Tajikistan, it was probably to provoke a reaction from China in that respect, and China will have to carefully evaluate how far they can go, because this is not happening in Tajikistan. Tajikistan also will have to react, and I've not seen any reaction from them so far. So let us see what happens and how does Tajikistan react. But that's an interesting development, and we will need to watch over it.
Absolutely interesting, because Afghanistan is also a part of the BRI, and Afghanistan, of course, we do know it's been making headlines because of its tiff with Pakistan, yes. The fact that Donald Trump has been eyeing the Bagram Air Base as well. Ambassador Goel, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, sharing your perspective, your insights into all of these developments. But viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching a World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Hong Kong police arrests 13 people in connection with last week's deadly fire that killed at least 151 in a residential complex. Early investigations revealed that substandard building materials contributed to the fire. Death toll from floods and landslides in Indonesia rises to 502. Meanwhile, 508 individuals still missing. Tulip Siddique, the British Labour MP for Hampstead and Highgate, has been sentenced to 2 years in prison by a Bangladeshi court over corruption charges related to her aunt, the country's ousted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Amid the ongoing peace talks on ending the Russia-Ukraine war, US President Donald Trump expresses hope, says good chance of reaching a Russia-Ukraine peace deal. As Ukrainian delegation wrapped up Ukraine peace talks in the United States, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that talks were productive, but more work is to be done on the truce proposal. At least 3 people have been killed and 8 others have been wounded in a strike by Russia on the east-central Ukrainian city of Dnipro. The governor has said that emergency crews are working to put out fires and search the rubble for anyone who may still be trapped. US President Donald Trump confirms reports of telephonic conversation with Venezuelan leader Maduro. However, Trump did not reveal further details. This call comes amid escalating tension between both the countries. Venezuelan leader accuses US of wanting to take over its oil resources. Venezuela has also asked OPEC Plus to show solidarity in the face of what it considers an escalation that could endanger Venezuela oil production. And viewers, we have some fresh breaking news inputs coming in at top of the bulletin. French President Emmanuel Macron and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have held talks with several European leaders. They have also spoken with the US envoy Steve Witkoff and Ukrainian Chief Secretary Rustem Umerov, focusing on diplomatic coordination and security matters amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The meetings underscore France and Ukraine's efforts to align strategies with European partners and strengthen multilateral engagement. We'll shortly be joined in by David K. Johnston, who's an American author from New York. He will be joining us to give more opinion on the latest round of discussions that are now being held between Zelensky and Macron at the Elysee Palace. Zelensky, of course, met with Macron as a US-led peace proposal is underway. Now, Zelensky has met Macron at the Elysee Presidential Palace as part of a flurry of diplomatic activity that ultimately seek to arrive at a potential ceasefire in the 4-year-long running war in Ukraine. In fact, Zelensky's visit to Paris is also followed by a meeting between a Ukrainian and US officials in Florida on Sunday, and tomorrow Steve Witkoff will be headed to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin. And now, the two sides have worked to make revisions to the US-authored plan that was developed in negotiations between Washington and Moscow, but it was condemned for being rather tilted towards Moscow's interests. The accusations that came from the European Union. Now, ahead of his meeting with Zelensky today, Macron's office had said that the two leaders would discuss conditions for a fair and lasting peace. Macron's office later also said he and Zelensky had held talks with European partners, including leaders from Britain, Germany, Poland, Italy, Norway, Finland, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Now, also included in the talks were European Union officials Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen and NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte. Macron and Zelensky also held phone calls with the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, those statements coming in from Emmanuel Macron's office. Zelensky turns to Europe after talks with US officials. And moving on, viewers, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has warned that talks between Russian President Putin and US envoy Steve Witkoff could pressure Ukraine into making concessions. Let's listen into her comments.
All the pressure will be put on the weaker side, because that is the easier way to stop this war when Ukraine surrenders. But this is not in anybody's interest, not in the interest of Ukraine, not in the interest of European Union, also not in the interest of the global overall security.
And speaking in Brussels, Kallas emphasized that Russia doesn't want peace and the European Union must strengthen Ukraine to stand firm. Her comments followed a proposal to limit Russia's military budget in response to a US-backed peace plan that restricts Ukraine's armed forces. This is what she said further.
I'm afraid that all the pressure will be put on the victim, which is that Ukraine has to make concessions and obligations. Whereas, in order to have peace, we shouldn't lose focus that it's actually Russia who has started this war, and Russia that is continuing this war, and Russia that is really targeting civilian infrastructure every single day to cause as much damage as possible.
Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Grushko rejected this, saying no power could curb Russia's military budget. Kallas also mentioned a productive meeting between US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Ukrainian officials, though the results are unclear. The European Union Council is expected to discuss military aid to Ukraine in the upcoming talks. In fact, European Union Foreign Policy Chief has signaled that pivotal moment is ahead as the bloc moves to reinforce Ukraine's defense. European Union viewers faces a pivotal week on Ukraine as ministers now focus on strengthening aid and assessing progress in challenging US diplomatic talks. Stern statements coming from Kaja Kallas. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has said that the coming days could be a pivotal moment for diplomatic efforts to end the war. She said the difficult but productive talks were held on the potential peace agreement. Kallas has also emphasized the urgency of reinforcing Ukraine's defenses, stressing that Moscow has showed no signs of seeking peace. In fact, in a statement she said, and I quote, "It is clear that Russia does not want peace and therefore we need to make Ukraine as strong as possible in order for them to be ready to stand up for themselves in this very, very difficult time." Calling the week ahead potentially decisive, Kallas has also pointed to the ongoing discussions in Washington. She said that both Ukraine's defense and foreign ministers would brief European Union officials on the meeting. Now, talks between US and Ukraine on Sunday in Florida centered on determining where a potential peace agreement would establish the de facto border with Russia, according to two Ukrainian officials. Now, speaking after the meeting, in fact, Secretary of State Marco Rubio also said that the session was productive and successful as negotiations continue on the peace plan. Kallas has stressed that Ukraine ultimately carries the burden of its own defense. She said Ukrainians are there alone. If they would be together with Europeans, they would definitely be much stronger. But I trust that the Ukrainians stand up for themselves. Statement coming from Kaja Kallas. On the Belgium hesitation, she said that using profits from frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine has legitimate concerns. And now joining us into the conversation here is Matthew Wadham, author and journalist from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us here at NewsX World and taking time out to speak with us. I want to ask my first question to you. What do you think is in stake for the European Union in the peace talks? Is it possible for a peace deal to be struck without Europe's demands being really met?
Their argument is without my demands being met? You mean without the U.S. demands being met?
European Union's demands.
Providing the
right now, I think the big sticking point appears to be, and we're very limited in terms of the information we have, because we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But the big sticking point with Ukraine is they don't want to have to give up territory that Russia has conquered through military conquest, and the two sides are putting on a happy face right now and saying that they're making a lot of progress. But, that could just be diplomatic smokescreen, happy faces all around. And I think the sticking point is they don't want to give up. Ukraine is opposed to land for peace. Now, what would make them agree to give up some of their land is not clear. I think they're pretty dead set against doing so. And I'm not sure what it would take from the United States or from Russia for Ukraine to agree to that, because that is a pretty fundamental point. They want to safeguard their sovereignty over their own land.
It's true that Congress hasn't provided statute.
All right, Matthew, could you also help me understand here the European Union that's primarily wanting to use the Russian frozen assets? Will Russia really allow for that?
I cannot imagine Russia would agree to give up its frozen assets unless it was a small enough amount that, you know, that Russia wouldn't miss the money. If it's a very large sum, I do not see them agreeing to it. If it's something minor, maybe they would agree to it, but they don't regard the they don't think that it was legitimate of the United States to launch all sorts of sanctions against Russia, and they don't think that they should have to give up their property in order to buy peace. But, you know, perhaps this is a point on which they're flexible. I imagine they're going to be more flexible on money than Ukraine is going to be on giving up its territory to Russia.
Thank you, Matthew, for joining us and speaking to us. Meanwhile, viewers, those are live visuals on your screens as Zelensky and Putin hold all important talks. Zelensky, in fact, says that Russia should get no reward for its war in Ukraine. And Macron has made claims to say that we will have better clarity on Russia's desire to move forward after US-Russia talks. Coming days will see further discussions between US and Ukraine's allies on security guarantees. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and French President Emmanuel Macron addressing the media now. On your screens are those visuals. Zelensky has reiterated that Russia should receive no reward for its aggression in Ukraine. In a recent statement, Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine's primary focus remains on securing guarantees for its security and maintaining its sovereignty amidst ongoing tension with Russia. Very crucial and most recent statements from Zelensky as US envoy Steve Witkoff will meet with Putin tomorrow in Moscow. The meet between Zelensky and Macron also coming after Ukrainian officials met with US officials in Florida on Sunday. Now, Macron also commented on the situation, stating that the coming days will see further discussions between the US and Ukraine's allies regarding security guarantees. French president stressed that European nations and Ukraine's allies must be present at the negotiating table to ensure the protection of Ukraine's territorial integrity. He also noted that Ukraine and only Ukraine has the right to decide on its territorial matters. Now moving on, viewers, the United States and the United Kingdom have reached a major deal to eliminate tariffs on UK-made pharmaceutical products and medical technology. As part of the agreement, the UK will increase the net price it pays for new medicines by 25%. This deal also includes a significant shift in the way the United Kingdom's National Health Service evaluates the cost effectiveness of the new drugs. In return, UK-origin pharmaceuticals, drug ingredients and medical technologies will be exempt from Section 32 tariffs. The agreement also involves adjustments to the UK's NICE framework for evaluating the cost effectiveness of new medicines with a focus on quality-adjusted life years. And Raymond Vickery, who's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Mr. Vickery, for joining us. Appreciate you giving us your time here at NewsX World. Mr. Vickery, what do you think is the significance of this deal, and what's the UK to gain now, given pharmaceuticals are one of its biggest exports to the U.S.?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It seems to me the major takeaway from this latest development in regard to the UK and pharmaceuticals is that the Trump administration's tariff policy is really in complete disarray. You know, back in April, there were the so-called liberation tariffs, which are supposed to be reciprocal. A number of tariffs were announced. Then a number of so-called agreements were announced. But those agreements really didn't get down into the granular level necessary to deal with the problems such as imports of pharmaceuticals from the UK. This later deal departs from the multilateral approach, which has served us so well since World War II, and seems to be, again, the Trump administration predilection for bilateral deals. There is a zero tariff after threatening 100% tariff. There are some so-called commitments to make further investments in the United States and, ironically, to raise the price charged to public health in the UK. So it's very difficult to tell how this landed. And of course, it has implications for India and other countries across the board as to what exactly will be the Trump approach on tariffs for pharmaceuticals. And of course, this is a very, very crucial area to build peace and prosperity throughout the world. So one can only hope that these matters will be worked through, but that is not happening at a rate necessary to get back to where we were before President Trump created this chaos.
All right. To stay on with us, Mr. Vickery, as we move on to some more developments that are coming in, and this one from Honduras that's holding its election. Now, a conservative candidate who is backed by U.S. President Donald Trump is narrowly leading a right-wing rival in the presidential election, as per the partial results from the Electoral Commission. According to the National Electoral Council, Nasri Asfura had 40% of the votes and led Salvador Nasrallah by just 0.2 percentage points, with 56% of votes counted. Both candidates were more than 20 percentage points ahead of Rishi Moncada of the ruling leftist party, who was trailing heavily, signaling another Latin American nation poised to swing towards rightward. However, the campaign was dominated by Trump's threat to cut aid if his favorite candidate, Asfura, would lose. The vote count from yesterday's election has progressed slowly, but the final results could take days. And I would request Mr. Vickery to join us back into the discussion here. Mr. Vickery, what's your reaction to the development? Of course, counting of votes is still underway. Only a certain number of votes has been counted as yet. But the elections, how fair were they really, given that Trump had already issued threats of cutting aid if his favorite candidate was not elected?
Well, thanks very much for letting me comment on this. You know, this is really a part of President Trump's view that he can revert to some sort of 19th century approach to Latin America, that's in the United States backyard, and therefore he can influence, control elections by interfering in the elections of sovereign nation like Honduras. The matter with Asfura is particularly troublesome because he has, at the same time he endorsed Asfura, he pardoned the former colleague of Asfura, who had been convicted and sentenced to 45 years in a U.S. prison for drug trafficking. And President Trump claims that what he's doing in regard to Venezuela, Colombia, blowing boats out of the water is to be in aid of stopping drug trafficking. And yet in regard to Honduras, he thinks he's made a deal with Asfura to bend to his wishes, and at the same time letting this drug trafficker out of prison. The race is very close. There is another conservative candidate, who is virtually tied with President Trump's chosen candidate. And at last count, only about 60% of the vote was in, and there was a large part of the vote not counted was in an area which may not be favorable to Asfora. So whether this is going to work for President Trump or not is not known. But here again, to wage peace and prosperity, you have to have a strategy, you have to have partners. You can't do it just like a real estate transaction. I might add that Mr. Asfora is a real estate developer, and so President Trump feels very comfortable with this kind of bilateral transaction. But it's no way to run a United States foreign policy. As I say, it's a reversion back into the time when there was a quasi-imperialistic approach by the United States to Latin America, which we had abandoned some time ago.
All right, thank you for your comment there, Mr. Vikri. I request you to stay on further with us. Viewers, there's some groundbreaking news now coming in regard to HIV prevention. South Africa, Eswatini and Zambia have begun rolling out a new twice-a-year injection called lenacapavir, the first public deployment of the breakthrough drug on the continent. The shot cuts HIV transmission risk by more than 99.9%, making it functionally similar to a powerful vaccine. South Africa's first doses were administered through a Wits University program funded by UNITAID. Zambia and Eswatini have launched theirs during World AIDS Day events after receiving 1,000 doses each from a US initiative. The drug currently costs $28,000 a year in the US, but Gilead has agreed to supply 2 million doses at no profit across high-burden countries. Generic versions are expected by 2027, priced around $40 per year. Request Mr. Vikri to join us back into the discussion here. Mr. Vikri, would you agree there's fresh hope now in HIV prevention in Africa?
Well, I think that this is a very positive development. Having a vaccine, really, which can prevent HIV, is a startling and very significant development. Unfortunately, the United States, after the leadership of President George W. Bush on fighting AIDS in Africa, has stepped back. It has abolished its USAID program. And so others are trying to step in to fill this void. The Gates Foundation is to collaborate with Indian generic pharmaceutical companies to try to manufacture this vaccine in a cost-effective manner. Unfortunately, that's not going to be available at earliest to 2027. And in the meantime, you see various private entities, Gilead, a pharmaceutical company, and others trying to fill the gap. Here again, to create peace and prosperity in the world, you need a strategy and you need partners. The late Secretary of State Albright called the United States the indispensable country, and it may not be indispensable, but its leadership certainly is necessary at this point, and unfortunately it is lacking. Thank goodness others like India are stepping up to try to fill this vacuum, particularly in the global south. And as one is to hope that private partnerships such as the Gates Foundation with Indian companies will be able to fill this void. But it is a very close question whether this life-saving development will be widespread enough to be able to make the kind of change which is necessary for the health of the African continent.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vikri, for continuing to stay with us in this discussion. And viewers, with that, we shift our focus to news from Saudi Arabia, which appears to have relaxed its alcohol rules again, just days after non-diplomatic residents were first allowed to buy booze in the kingdom. Now, foreign residents in Riyadh say that non-Muslim expats earning at least 50,000 riyals a month, which is about $13,300, are now being allowed to purchase alcohol at the country's only licensed store. Until late last month, only diplomats and premium visa holders could shop there, but residency staff now verify their residency and salary through a government platform before completing the sales. Purchases have surged, with thousands of premium visa holders already buying alcohol since the initial easing. There are also reports that additional alcohol shops could open in Jeddah and the Bahrain in 2026, though there's been no official confirmation on that yet. The quiet loosening marks another step in the kingdom's drive to attract foreign talent and investment while navigating the sensitivities of a country where alcohol has been banned since 1952. And that's all the time that we have for. Thank you for staying tuned to NewsX World for all the latest news and updates from around the world.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with.
Hello and welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. On that note, let's take a look at news making headlines this hour. Amid escalating tensions between Venezuela and the United States, Donald Trump has reportedly rejected Maduro's request for amnesty and sanction removal in a recently held phone call. White House has stated that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has approved the second strikes on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat, but has also clarified that he did not issue an order to kill everyone on board. As Russia-Ukraine peace talks gain momentum, US President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and his advisor Jared Kushner is to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow this week. Russian forces have claimed that they've captured the eastern Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, which is a key logistics hub. However, Kyiv has not confirmed the Russian claims yet. US President Donald Trump has raised doubts on the Honduras presidential vote, stating it appears that Honduras is trying to meddle with the results further, alleging that the vote was stopped prematurely. The death toll in the Hong Kong high-rise fire has climbed to 151, with more than 40 people still missing. As per reports, 13 have been arrested so far. French President Emmanuel Macron is all set to visit China on his fourth state visit. This comes as Europe seeks to balance economic and security threats from Beijing. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has warned that China poses national security threats to the United Kingdom. This comes ahead of a crucial decision on the Chinese super embassy in the UK next week. Well, viewers, those are, of course, the headlines and our top focus. Now, according to reports, US President Donald Trump has refused a series of requests from Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro following a short conversation between the two leaders earlier that was confirmed by Trump. The call, which was held on the 21st of November, came after months of increasing US pressure on Venezuela, including strikes against alleged drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, a senior US official has stated that Trump has held talks with top advisors of his administration in order to discuss the pressure campaign on Venezuela. The official has stated that the Oval Office meeting included senior members of Trump's national security team, but did not provide any further details of the talks. Meanwhile, Maduro has appeared at a rally after the phone call and told his supporters that Venezuela does not want, quote-unquote, a slaves peace, and that a US military deployment has been testing Venezuela for 22 weeks now. Listen in.
Queremos paz, pero paz con soberanía, paz con igualdad, paz con libertad. No queremos la paz de los esclavos, ni queremos la paz de las colonias. Colonia, nunca. Esclavos, jamás. Hemos vivido 22 semanas de una agresión que se puede calificar como terrorismo psicológico. Son 22 semanas que nos han puesto a prueba y el pueblo de Venezuela.
With us on the broadcast is Mr. Matthew Wadham, American journalist and author, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Of course, we were discussing what's transpiring as far as Venezuela is concerned just 2 days back as well. And it does seem now that with the requests being denied, requests that were made by Maduro being denied, in a phone call that was held on the 21st of November last month, it does seem that the US is now heading to, in fact, increasing pressure on Venezuela, increasing pressure on the Maduro administration, which is not recognized by Washington. We've also just heard a statement by Nicolas Maduro that Venezuela does not want, quote-unquote, a slaves peace, and that US military deployment has been testing the country for 22 weeks. What do you make of what is transpiring? What can we expect next over here? Because it does seem that Maduro's requests for amnesty and sanction removal have not been, looked upon very kindly by Donald Trump.
Well, Donald Trump did reportedly give Maduro an ultimatum. He told him he had to step down or else, but we don't know what the or else means. Are there going to be airstrikes? Does he want to have a ground invasion, which most people think is very unlikely? We don't know what exactly is going to happen, and I think Maduro was trying to get safe passage from Venezuela, and this is the sort of thing that dictators do when they're desperate and thinking of fleeing their countries. So he may continue to press and exchange, make an offer that he will step down in exchange for the U.S. not invading. But I kind of doubt that, because he's a dictator and he likes being in power and he doesn't want to give it up. I think he views most of this as just talk, And, it's just part of the game that he plays to stay in power. You must keep in a communist, or socialist country like Venezuela, you need to keep people intimidated. You need to keep them in line, and you need to keep them scared, or they're less likely to be obedient to the powers that be. So, it's interesting that it's being widely reported that President Trump gave Nicolas Maduro an ultimatum, and it just shows that the United States is very serious about regime change in Venezuela. Now, what exactly is going to happen next? I don't know, and I'm sure if you asked the people at the Pentagon, they wouldn't tell you, because that defeats the whole purpose of war planning.
Absolutely.
It should be a surprise, right?
Absolutely, but it's also speaking of the larger power game that's at play over here. Last time, of course, you mentioned China, but another very crucial player here is Russia as well. If the US does carry out direct strikes, airstrikes, as many people are now, many analysts are pointing, is the more likely plan that the US is going to go with. How do you think China and Russia will react?
I suspect China and Russia will issue strongly worded communiques condemning the United States and do nothing, because it's not their sphere of influence. Russia and China obviously have a lot of pull with the dictatorship in Venezuela, but it's not their part of the world. It's not their hemisphere. And I don't think they'll do anything about it except complain and maybe take other actions. What do they normally do? Expel some diplomats, file some new economic sanctions. They're just gonna whine about it. I don't think they're going to take military action. Russia is not going to commit to troops to defend Venezuela, and I very much doubt that China would either. So they're just going to be very unhappy about it, and that and it will continue to poison relations between the United States and China and Russia. So I don't think anything will happen, basically.
All right, so requesting you to stay on with us, because we're tracking some other rather crucial updates as far as Venezuela is concerned. We're now learning that the White House has defended a U.S. admiral's decision to conduct multiple strikes on an alleged Venezuelan drug smuggling vessel back in September, stating that he had Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's authorization. President Donald Trump had in fact emphasized last week that he would not have wanted a second strike on the boat, and stated that Hegseth denied giving such an order. But White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has now stated that Hegseth had authorized Admiral Frank Bradley to conduct the strikes on the 2nd of September. Listen in.
So how was that second strike in following the law of armed conflict in that second operation?
Again, Andrew, I would reiterate to you the strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict.
There, of course, we've just heard what Caroline Leavitt has had to say. She's also stated that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war, and further gone on to state that POTUS has a right to take them out if they are threatening the United States of America. Apart from this, Pete Hegseth has also tweeted out that Admiral Mitch Bradley is an American hero, a true professional, and has his 100% support and stand by him and his combat decisions that he made on the September 2 missions and all others since. This is what Pete Hegseth has tweeted out a while back. Apart from this, his main official account has also stated that, as highlighted from beginning and in every statement since, the strikes are highly effective. They're specifically intended to be lethal, kinetic strikes. The declared intent is to stop lethal drugs, destroy narco boats and kill the narco terrorists who are poisoning the American people, and every trafficker we kill is affiliated with a designated terrorist organization. Further on, he's also gone on to state through his official account that current operations in the Caribbean are lawful under both US and international law, with all actions in compliance with the law of armed conflict and approved by the best military and civilian lawyers up and down the chain of command. In the meantime, we've also seen certain reports come in from American media houses which states that yes, the strikes were authorized by Admiral Bradley. There's been a lot of pushbacks by Republicans who are branding the narrative that has been sketched by these media houses as fake, as sort of a kill all survivors order rather than kill the narco terrorists orders. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Matthew Wadham. Interesting developments coming in. I've tried to put all of this into context, of course, take our viewers through the latest statements that are coming in as well. At the outset, I wanted to understand from you, what do you make of this entire saga? Hegseth, of course, maintaining that yes, the orders were lawful because the intent was declared long back to strike down the narco terrorists who are affiliated with terror groups back in Venezuela.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I know the basic principles of the law of war are there to regulate war, to keep it civilized. If war can be civilized, you know, one could have a philosophical debate about that. But they're there to keep the conduct of armies of combatants civilized. So. You know, it's amazing. We've just gone from a few days ago to the breathless reports that Defense Secretary Hegseth was a war criminal, that he'd ordered, you know, that he'd given a no survivors, a no quarter order, you know, for shooting, you know, drowning sailors after their boats had been disabled, which would, you know, according to the traditional understanding of war crimes, that would be a war crime because they are hors de combat. They are people, that's an international law term to refer to soldiers who have been taken out of a conflict because they're disabled or injured, or because their ship is sinking. So yeah, it would be a war crime if it happened, but now the narrative has shifted and it looks like he didn't make an order. I didn't give a no survivors order.
Yes.
Obviously, in war, and one could make an argument about whether, you know, this is a valid war because war has not been declared by the United States. But from the American point of view, I think they're interpreting the law of war correctly. You are allowed to kill the enemy, and the enemy they've identified are these South American narco traffickers. And the thing that you're not allowed to do is kick them when they're down, so to speak. If they're hors de combat, if they're helpless, you know, floating there in the water after their boat has sunk. But the evidence is far from clear that such an order was ever given. And in fact, the New York Times and the Washington Post have been backing away from their initial reports that is what Hegseth did. And you have to wonder where those stories came from, because almost all of these stories are, except for the ones of the last 2 days or so, have been based on anonymous sources. And you know, anonymous sources are sometimes helpful, but sometimes they're lies, and they're used to spread propaganda or to demoralize one side in a conflict.
Absolutely.
So I think it's very interesting what is going on. I don't think it seems to me that Congress is, including Republicans, are concerned about what went on, and they're demanding answers. So I think they're going to be having some hearings on what went on allegedly in the Caribbean Sea with the narco traffickers and the supposed no survivors order that now we think never happened. So, they do take this very seriously, and they've been getting pressure from within their own base. There's a lot of rank and file Republicans who are not okay with the idea of killing soldiers who are hors de combat, who have been taken out of combat. And I suspect what we're going to find is it never happened. But, that's what Congress is there to do. They're there to investigate. And, if it did happen, then there's going to be a fall guy. And I very much doubt that it would be Secretary Hegseth paying the price. It would be the commander of the mission, the admiral, whose name escapes me at the moment. I think he's an admiral.
Yes.
So someone will have to be a fall guy for it. That's the way politics usually works, and it's a matter of how that happens. Or nothing could happen. They could conclude that the U.S. military behaved quite properly. But it depends what evidence is turned up and how these things develop.
Interesting perspective, because just a couple of days back I was having a conversation with a military man, someone who served here in India, regarding the video that was put out by Senator Mark Kelly. Of course, not directly related to these strikes, but a larger conversation around what the US plans to do in Venezuela.
Right.
Something that he told me is that intent behind orders needs to be very clear to make them lawful. I think that's what Caroline Leavitt has tried to address, stating that, presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. That's something that she's made the intent very clear over there. So I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking some further updates. In this particular case, we're learning that UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric has stated that the United Nations is gravely concerned that the boat strikes on these Venezuelan vessels may have violated international law. He's also urged a transparent probe into this matter. Listen in.
Secretary General remains gravely concerned about the strikes on vessels allegedly involved in drug trafficking in the region. I would remind you and refer to what our High Commissioner Volker Turk said recently, which he says he found that these strikes may violate international human rights law and called for investigations that are transparent into these.
All right, viewers, there of course we heard what was stated. I'll leave the discussion regarding Venezuela at that, and I'll be shifting focus to what's taking place in Europe. Interesting developments coming in as far as the war is concerned. We're now learning that Russian President Vladimir Putin has recently visited a military command post to receive briefings from his top military commanders. You can see the visuals on your screens over there. These briefings reportedly focused on recent military gains in Ukraine, as the Kremlin puts it. In the meeting, Putin was informed about the capture of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. Moreover, a chief of Russia's general staff, Valery, has now provided additional details on military advances. According to him, Russian forces in the north have finished, quote-unquote, liberating Vovchansk and have taken control of 3 other settlements in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. Listen in.
Север сегодня завершила освобождение города Волчанск. Кроме того, в рамках создания полосы безопасности в приграничных районах Сумской и Харьковской областей Украины в ноябре под наш контроль на этой территории перешли еще 3 населенных пункта. Это Синельниково, Цегельное и Двуречанск. Войска группировки «Центр» освободили город Красноармейск и продолжает уничтожение подразделений противника в Димитрове. Кроме того, часть сил группировки успешно развивает наступление в Днепропетровской области.
Now, the Russian president has emphasized that taking control of Pokrovsk would support ongoing offensive operations against Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials have not confirmed the claims being made by the Russians yet. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Matthew Wadham. Interesting developments because we'd seen the Russians earlier as well, a couple of weeks back claim that they had encircled Pokrovsk. They're reiterating this claim as of now. Pokrovsk, we know, is a very, very crucial logistics hub for the Ukrainians. If captured, what does this mean for Ukraine? How much of a setback is it? And if not, why would the Russians then bluff?
Well, Russian dictators are notorious liars, so I don't think that we should take anything that they say at face value. Now, that doesn't mean they're lying here. Maybe they did overrun Pokrovsk, and if that's how you pronounce it. My pronunciation of Ukrainian and Russian place names is not very good. Anyway, the if it happened, it's not good for Ukraine, and it's going to be quite demoralizing, and it's not helpful in terms of Ukraine's defense against Russia. But maybe we need to wait and see if it actually has happened. There must be some independent parties, like the U.S. could verify whether it's happened or not with its massive satellite network. So I don't know why that hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's too new a development and they haven't released any data, any reports on it yet. But yeah, if this is if Russia's won control of that territory, then that's it's not a good thing for Ukraine. It doesn't mean it's the end, but it's losing a major place of strategic importance is not helpful to their cause. But I think we have to wait and see if it actually did happen. Now, how is this going to affect the peace talks between the two countries? If Russia could be just saying it to try and gain an upper hand, to try and force Ukrainians to agree to things they wouldn't otherwise agree. So, you have to wonder, is Russia speaking factually or is it speaking aspirationally? Is it just sort of projecting what it wants to happen? And, sitting here, in the Washington, D.C. region, I really can't tell you what the answer to that question is.
Indeed, as you've pointed out, the timing of this particular announcement is very interesting because negotiations are underway. Of course, we've also learned that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are slated to meet Vladimir Putin sometime this week as well. So with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your perspective, your insights on all these very, very crucial developments. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus away from the war in Europe towards what's happening as far as Honduras is concerned. We're now learning that the Honduran presidential candidates Nasri Asfura and Salvador Nasralla are virtually tied in the election vote count, each holding just under 40% in a neck-to-neck race, which has been plagued by technical problems with the electoral results website. Now, the National Electoral Council in Honduras, its website has shown Asfura, the conservative National Party candidate, who's been backed by US President Donald Trump, is leading over Liberal Party candidate Nasralla by only 515 votes. These were the results that were posted around midday. However, the exact number of votes counted remains unclear due to ongoing issues with the electoral portal, which was down for extended periods throughout the day. Let's in fact take a look at what Asfura had to say.
Yo quiero que quedemos claros aquí. Ante mi seriedad, yo no vengo a hacer ninguna proclamación. Solo vengo a decir, tengamos paciencia, todo el pueblo hondureño, el CNE que termine de hacer su trabajo y nos vamos a dar cuenta de la realidad. Entonces, nosotros con toda la información que tenemos del CNE, con esa propia información, los números son distintos a lo que hoy se está saliendo en pantalla, porque nosotros lo llevamos mucho más adelantado con el informe del CNE. Gracias, con el informe del CNE. Pero también tenemos ese gran soporte de nuestro equipo, de nuestras actas, de la estructura que montamos previniendo este tema como lo estamos viviendo en este preciso momento.
All right, there, viewers, we've heard what was stated. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has emphasized that it appears that Honduras is trying to change the results of their presidential election, alleging that the country's election commission prematurely stopped counting votes. With us on the broadcast is Ms. Irina Sukerman, senior journalist, joining us from New York. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. It does seem that there's been a considerable blow that has been dealt to the ruling leftist party and its candidate, Rixi Moncada. She's nowhere to have been featured over here. The race is practically between Nasri Esfera, who's been backed by Donald Trump, and Salvador Nasrallah. Nasrallah is the centrist liberal candidate, and Esfera, of course, the conservative right-wing leaning candidate. There was also a wild card thrown in between by, the pardon granted by Donald Trump to the former president of Honduras as well, Juan Orlando Hernandez. What do you make of one, the results freezing midday and the portal not really moving about, and Donald Trump's keen interest in the outcome?
Well, a lot of it shouldn't come as a surprise. First of all, Trump's statements themselves kind of had an impact in a very highly polarized environment. But on top of that, you have technical issues with the Election Commission results website, delays in voter tallying, and all of that contributing to public distrust, political tensions, and then you have Trump literally meddling in an election and in favor of one of the candidates, but also threatening on his social media account that if the vote counting process is mishandled or changed, they would be held to pay, as he said. What that means, nobody knows. Presumably sanctions and some sort of political and economic pressure. The vote was already very close. And these technical issues have contributed to this chaotic environment. There's multiple accusations from all sides of possible vote manipulation, possible fraud, or improper interference, including accusing Trump of foreign influence, always a huge factor in Latin American elections. So regardless of what ends up happening, legitimacy is very likely to be contested both politically and socially. So far, there is no claim that either side has full control over the result in any definitive way, but there is something taking place on the background, which is that at the same time as this election taking place, Trump vowed to pardon the ex-Honduras president serving 45 years in prison for alleged drug trafficking, and essentially granting that pardon would strengthen Asfura's faction indirectly by essentially helping the faction affiliated with him in terms of credibility and so forth. Now, Trump has been paying close attention to this election for one of the reasons being that his entire national security posture has shifted towards the Western Hemisphere. Therefore, the U.S. foreign policy apparatus is now being regeared towards paying much closer attention to Latin American elections and developments, especially anything regarding a potential win for conservative candidates who could be considered political allies of Trump. And of course, drug trafficking issue, ironically, has taken a huge spotlight given the Trump's attacks on the alleged Venezuelan cartels, while at the same time pardoning a president who is serving time for his ties to drug trafficking.
Absolutely, ma'am. You have put it into context, of course. We have seen the regime in Honduras forging close ties with Cuba and Venezuela. It has trade relations with the United States and Donald Trump as well. How exactly with the change from the Labour Party to whoever comes into power will impact the equation with the US remains to be seen. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing all that background with our viewers, and of course, in simple and lucid terms. On that note, we shift focus towards what's taking place as far as Taiwanese president is concerned. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te, while addressing the army reservists in the northeastern county of Yunnan, has stated that there's no room for compromise when it comes to Taiwan's security. Meanwhile, freedom and democracy are core to foundational values that have nothing to do with ideological disputes. Lai last week announced a $40 billion supplementary defense budget to underscore Taiwan's determination to defend itself against rising military threats from China, which claims that the democratically governed island is its own territory. Lai has also emphasized that in the face of China's coercion and harassment, the government had to spend more on its defenses and preparations against foreign threats. Taiwan's government has announced a reform of the training of its reserve forces, including doubling down on combat and shooting exercises, and in fact extended compulsory military service to 1 year from the previous 4 months as well. These are decisions that have been in place for the last 4 years. Meanwhile, with us on the broadcast is Dr. Asta Chadda from the Ritsumeikan University. She's an associate professor of international relations, joining us from Kyoto in Japan. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting developments. We've also recently seen Taiwan try to acquire Israeli technology in order to protect its civilian infrastructure. It's sort of separated its new ambitions from its conventional military security apparatus, and also focused on its own airports, its ports as well, because of the increasing Chinese presence, the increasing incursions into the median line as well. What do you make of this $40 billion boost to the defense apparatus of Taiwan, and considering the fact that we have seen tensions boiling in this region between China and Japan as well, where do you see all of this heading to next?
Well, I mean, the President Chai Ting-lei's, his statement and the fact that they're trying to be very unambiguous this time with regards to Taiwanese security does shed light on twofold objectives that they want to achieve. One is clearly the fact that they're centralizing Taiwanese sovereignty, which is, according to them, non-negotiable, right? So this is the strategic, unambiguous sort of statement that they're making, specifically with regard to the centralization of defense in this whole, sort of brewing conflict. And this increased budget shows that this is no longer just about conventional defense. They're going to be targeting in some way the strengthening of their capabilities towards asymmetric warfare. They're trying to look at this issue as a whole of society defense issue, and not just a border issue per se, or a maritime issue per se. And then on the other hand is the fact that, as you mentioned, there are statements by the other world leaders, including those by Japan, where they have linked the Taiwanese security in some way to the Japanese security, or the fact that this could lead to some sort of a conflict escalation in the region. So what this does is, this overall, from a Taiwanese perspective, this requires Taiwan to heighten its deterrence at the same time by responding in some way to this increased risk. So what they seem to be doing is, now they seem to be more empowered in that sense to be explicitly rejecting any compromise, when it comes to a third-party mediation, trying to talk about a peace talk. And what they're saying is that the stakes of this conflict have already increased. And so as to do that, they need to prepare Taiwan, according to this statement, to potentially lead to sort of this way, such as, because they're factoring in the fact that probably Beijing already has the capabilities to engage in a military gray zone sort of a coercion tactic. So Taiwan needs to step up its own capabilities, not just purely in terms of defense, but overall in terms of strengthening their claims of sovereignty and their claims of freedom, which they hold to be central to this whole Taiwan issue. And that seems to address not just anxieties that exist in Taiwan, but they also seem to be in some way responding to the comments by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, as well as in a way to signal to the United States what exactly is the Taiwanese stance, both politically, in terms of defense capabilities, also in terms of boosting their domestic morale with regard to this worsening situation in the Taiwanese Straits.
Absolutely, and the signaling to the US is a very interesting point you raised there, ma'am, because despite the defense deals, we have seen the US is trying to, Trump especially is trying to push the G2 agenda with Beijing, and the apparatus in the United States has been rather cold towards the Taiwanese so far. I have run out of time, therefore I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, putting that into perspective for our viewers. But one last piece of information we're tracking on the broadcast. Thousands of people are rallying in the Bulgarian capital Sofia and several other cities protesting against the 2026 budget plan. Protesters want the government to stick with its promise to withdraw the 2026 budget. Some have even clashed with police, who've cordoned off offices of the ruling parties and pelted officers with rocks, bottles and firecrackers. Opposition parties and other organizations say that they are protesting against the government's plan to hike social security contributions and taxes on dividends to finance higher spending as well as state corruption. Listen in to what the former Prime Minister of Bulgaria had to say.
So there are two main reasons. So one of them is that people are really fed up with the lies. And there were a number of lies that were related to the budget that we discussed today. And the second reason is that people that govern today, they're characterized with a lot of arrogance, with a lot of brutal force that they use to impose their views, including the budget, but not only the budget. So the people are really fed up with this, and they want to say stop. This will not work in this way.
All right, viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Pia and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Today, we turn to a region where conflict and constant shift in power dynamics is defining the moment. From the women-led Woman Life Freedom Revolt in Iran, a movement that reverberated across the world, to the aftermath of the 2-year war in Gaza and the new peace agreement approved by the UN Security Council, the Middle East is at a critical inflection point. Israel's latest strikes in Beirut, targeting a top Hezbollah commander, signals a new phase of escalation, even as questions linger about Hezbollah's disarmament and regional security. At the same time, the future of the Abraham Accords appears to be expanding, with Kazakhstan joining and Saudi Arabia reassessing its position, reshaping the geopolitical map in real time. And in Iran itself, Tehran's open rejection of the IAEA's call for transparency over its nuclear weapons-grade uranium stockpile raises urgent questions about the regime's capacity, legitimacy and vulnerability, especially amidst economic strain and international pressure. To talk about all of this, joining us now is Israel's international spokesperson to the United Nations and author of the book Unveiled, Inside Iran's Women's Life Freedom Revolt, Mr. Jonathan Haronoff. He's a British-Israeli journalist and has written for many international publications. In his role, he represents Israel's position at the United Nations and has made numerous media appearances to discuss the region's geopolitical dynamics. Thank you so much for taking our time and joining us, Mr. Haronoff. At the outset, could you tell our viewers a little bit about your book Unveiled, which is on the Women Life Freedom Revolt in Iran? What compelled you to pen this body of work, and what message do you wish to send across?
Great to be with you and thank you for having me. There were many motivations behind writing my book Unveiled, Inside Iran's Women Life Freedom Revolt. On a personal note, it's a region where my family is from and I'm intimately tied there, but also professionally and journalistically, I've always had a fascination in the Middle East, in Iran, in Israel and the tensions that exist there. And I think I found that many people have an interest in Iran, but they don't have a very deep understanding of what's really happening in the region. So they may understand that the Islamic Republic currently reigns supreme there. They understand that there's a very damaging and expensive and dangerous nuclear weapons program that the Islamic Republic has been building, that they've cultivated a web of dangerous proxies. But if you ask them who the Iranian people are, what these 92 million people inside Iran are feeling, are thinking, what kind of relationship they would like to have with the West, with the United States, with Israel, people don't know. So I wanted to write a book where I interviewed Iranians on the ground and in the diaspora to understand their experiences under the regime. And the book's writing coincides with this massive women-led uprising that transformed Iran following the killing of a young 22 Iranian Kurdish woman, Gina Mahsa Amini, in September of 2022.
Indeed, sir, as you pointed out, Iran's women-led protests did become a historic symbol of defiance. What do you think the world still misunderstands at large about Iranian women and their resistance?
I think there are still some misperceptions around Iranian women and men. I think people don't realize just how vast the gulf is between the 46-year-old Islamic Republic and the Iranian Persian women and men whose history, whose civilization, whose culture spans thousands of years. Sometimes I think there's an assumption that the regime and its people share the same views, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Another misperception is that since the Women Life Freedom movement has sort of subsided a bit in terms of street protests, I think there's an assumption that the movement is completely dead, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You still see an incredible amount of defiance and courage displayed by women who are going around on the streets of Iran unveiled, and the risks are still there. The morality police is still there. The regime is still doing whatever it can to punish people who flout the country's strict dress codes, but the people of Iran are continuing to show extraordinary bravery and defiance in their multi-decade quest for.
Speaking of the Middle East at large, it has been fraught with tensions for a while, but we've seen it spike, particularly with the war that dragged on for about 2 years. What do you make of the peace agreement that is now in place and the UNSC approval of the Trump administration's larger plan? Could an international stabilization force then lead to meaningful change and reconstruction of Gaza?
It was a very significant step that we saw at the United Nations Security Council with essentially the ratification of President Trump's 20 peace plan. And it's an important step because we can finally move forward beyond the first phase of the agreement, even though we're not completely done with it. And there are still 3 deceased hostages held in Gaza by Hamas. But we can move forward to the much thornier topic of how do we disarm Hamas, how do we demilitarize Gaza, and how do we move the region forward to a period of prosperity. And I'm hopeful that the construction of the International Stabilization Force can lead to greater peace. And I think there's a widespread recognition that Hamas cannot play a role in any future for Gaza if we want the region to be truly peaceful. So I'm hopeful, but I think there's a lot of work to do.
Indeed, we've also in fact learned that Israel recently carried out strikes in the Lebanese capital of Beirut, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure and one of its top commanders as well. This has come in the backdrop of the ceasefire condition of Hezbollah's disarmament not being met, despite the United States' best efforts. In your assessment, what message is Israel sending, whether to Lebanon, Iran, and the world at large, by taking matters into its own hands now?
I think the message is clear that Israel is a country focused and dedicated and desirable of peace. But when there are flagrant violations and attempts to destabilize the region and attack Israel, Israel will take necessary steps to defend its own people and protect its territorial integrity. And what we saw with the targeted and precise killing of the Hezbollah chief of staff was exactly that. This was a person who was hell-bent on the reconstruction and rebuilding of Hezbollah. He was a person with American-Israeli blood on his hands, with a $5 million bounty on his head. And if the Lebanese government weren't going to address the significant threat posed by individuals like him, then Israel had to take limited steps in order to prevent any threat on Israel's border. But Israel is committed to peace, committed to the ceasefire understandings that are currently in place. But when it will also take necessary steps to enforce those agreements when there are violations occurring.
Speaking of peace efforts, do you see a scope for the expansion of the Abraham Accords? This month itself, Donald Trump announced that Kazakhstan is joining the Accords. There were also murmurs that Saudi Arabia is eyeing the same as well. However, the latter did decide to separate its defense dealings from the Accords. What is your assessment?
These are very positive steps indeed. And I think it's a signal that we are moving slowly beyond this period of conflict and animosity and hostility in the region that was very much orchestrated by the Islamic Republic of Iran and its proxies, including Hezbollah and Hamas. And I think now that Islamic Republic's proxy force has been defanged and the ring of fire that it erected around Israel has been pierced, we can move forward to a period where nations once again, like we saw on October the 6th, 2023, are beginning to talk about expanding the Abraham Accords, joining the Abraham Accords, and not just nations in the Middle East, as you rightly pointed out, nations beyond the Middle East that are buying into this vision of mutual collaboration, trade thing. These are very positive steps that will help create a much more positive Middle East for everyone.
And coming back to Iran itself, we recently learned that Tehran has rejected the International Atomic Energy Agency's call to cooperate, grant its inspectors access to Iranian nuclear sites, and provide precise information about its stockpile of nuclear weapons-grade uranium. It went, in fact, so far as to threaten unspecified retaliatory actions as well. Is the Iranian government in any position to do so, as on one hand sanctions have adversely impacted its economy, and on the other the regime is facing pressure domestically as well?
I think it's a sign of the Islamic Republic's misguided priorities, and that it's continued to be very laser focused on reconstructing its nuclear weapons program, which was significantly scaled back following the Israeli Operation Rising Lion, followed by the US Operation Midnight Hammer in June. But it's, as you rightly point out, there are very significant domestic issues underway inside Iran that are not being addressed. And this nuclear weapons stuff is being prioritized. And domestic issues, I mean, there's a very debilitating water crisis currently enveloping much of Iran, where 20 of Iran's 31 provinces haven't seen any rainwater since March, where the country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, has warned that Tehran, which is a megacity of around 10 million people, it's essentially on its knees, it's taking its last breaths, and it's on the verge of running out of water, where one of the 5 major dams inside Tehran, which is called the Amir Kabir Dam and responsible for supplying much of the city's drinking water, is currently at 8% capacity. And these are very, very serious issues, existentially threatening issues that are threatening the lives of ordinary Iranians. And instead of addressing these issues, which are a result of decades of corruption and mismanagement, the Islamic Republic seems to be focused more on arming itself, focusing on this nuclear weapons program, trying to rearm its proxies. And the people of Iran are noticing, and that's, I think, why there's so much resentment and animosity towards the regime by the people, because the regime is not addressing their very, very serious grievances.
All right, with that, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Jonathan Harunoff, for taking out time, speaking to us on Focal Length today, of course, sharing your perspective and analysis. With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this episode of The Focal Length. For more international news and updates as well as perspectives, stay tuned on NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
and welcome viewers. I'm Pia and you're watching Golf Today on NewsX World. On that note, let's take a look at the headlines this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has appeared in court first time after requesting Israeli President Isaac Herzog for a pardon in his long-running corruption trial. US President Donald Trump has invited Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House. This comes after Trump urged Israel to maintain a strong, true dialogue with Syria. As Pope Leo XIV nears the end of his first overseas trip, he has urged peaceful coexistence in the war-torn region of the Middle East. He's also described the purpose of the visit as a mission of peace. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has denounced the attacks on commercial ships in the Black Sea as unacceptable. He's warned that escalation may take place if strikes continue. A Turkish-owned oil tanker which was damaged near Senegal's coast was reportedly hit by 4 external explosions. As per authorities, there are no casualties or pollution as of now. Egypt and the European Union are preparing to expand training of Palestinian police for deployment in Gaza. Meanwhile, this deployment is part of US President Donald Trump's 21-point peace plan. The US State Department has approved the potential sale of sustainment for F-16 jets and related equipment to Bahrain. Pentagon has stated that the estimated cost of the deal is $455 million. As Russia and Ukraine peace talks gain momentum, US President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and advisor Jared Kushner are set to meet Russian President Putin in Moscow this week. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is appearing in court for the first time since asking the country's president, Isaac Herzog, for a pardon in his long-running corruption trial, a request which is being strongly backed by his close ally, US President Donald Trump. Opposition politicians have come out against the request, with some arguing that any pardon should be conditional on Netanyahu retiring from politics and admitting guilt. Others have stated that the Prime Minister must first call national elections, which are due by October 2026, that is next year, before requesting any pardon. Netanyahu is Israel's longest-serving Prime Minister. He was indicted back in 2019 on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust after years of investigations. Meanwhile, he has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing and made no admission of guilt in his request for a pardon. Netanyahu's lawyers have stated that he believed that the legal proceedings, if completed, would end in a complete acquittal. Take a look at what Netanyahu had to say about his request.
הגישו היום עורכי דיני בקשה לחנינה לנשיא המדינה. אני מצפה שכל מי שטובת המדינה לנגד עיניו יתמוך בצעד זה. מדינת ישראל ניצבת מול אתגרים כבירים ולצידם הזדמנויות אדירות. כדי להדוף את האיומים, כדי לממש את ההזדמנויות, נדרשת אחדות לאומית. המשך המשפט קורע אותנו מבפנים, מעורר מחלקות הזאת, מעצים שסעים.
Joining us on the broadcast is Gedalia Blum, Middle East Affairs expert from Eli in Israel. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. High-profile court attendance by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This is his first since requesting Israeli President Isaac Herzog for a pardon. In fact, we earlier seen Donald Trump be very vocal about requesting a pardon and granting a pardon for Netanyahu. He had even gone to the Knesset earlier and made those statements on the dais there as well. What are your expectations as far as the legal proceedings are concerned? Do you think the Israeli president will heed Netanyahu's request, or will consider or factor in what the opposition politicians have been pointing out?
Well, when it comes to, first of all, thanks for having me. When it comes to President Herzog, his decision-making, his position as president, many don't know, but the appointment as president is a non-political appointment, and President Herzog has been performing his duties in line with that specifically. He's been very, very good at keeping out of the politics and becoming more of a unifying factor. And I think that that's his position at this time right now. His public statements were, no amount of intimidation is going to sway me. I'm going to do what is legal. I'm going to do what's right for the state of Israel and for the people of Israel. And so there are some legal matters as far as, do you grant a pardon prior to any conviction? Apparently not. Apparently you can't pardon somebody because you're not pardoning them for anything. So it looks like there's a different category that we're dealing with here. And I think that's what President Herzog and the legal teams are looking into, if there's even any kind of pathway to end the trial early and to allow Prime Minister Netanyahu to continue with his duties.
Indeed, a quick follow-up to that, because I earlier referred to Donald Trump also being very vocal about this particular request for a pardon. I mentioned earlier that Trump did, in fact, take the dais at the Knesset and spoke there regarding this as well. How is Trump's statements really shaping a perception of the public at large with regards to the legitimacy of this process? Is it being viewed as external interference or some sort of politicization of this pardon request?
It's interesting enough that not many people here in Israel are talking about any interference. And I will say this: I will say that President Trump's his intent is not to support his friend. His intent is to promote the America First agenda. And he has invested many decades in his relationship with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And Trump has a plan for the region, not only for Israel and Gaza, but also for the greater region. And he believes that right now, I believe that he thinks, is that Benjamin Netanyahu is the best person to be in the position as Prime Minister in Israel in order for him to push forward with his agenda. And we see this even as recently as this morning, or yesterday, when President Trump was on the phone with Prime Minister Netanyahu and calling him to not only come to visit the White House again for the 5th time since his inauguration in January, but to also make sure that the peace in Syria is maintained and to allow the new president al-Jolani to have time to transform his country into a peaceful country. So when it comes to your original question, I'm not seeing anything on the ground. I'm not hearing anything on the ground about international interference. That's not really our priority. I think what Trump did was bring out the issue of what everybody was talking about, is after all these years of court hearings, when exactly is this going to end? And I think everybody's happy to see it end. Many people are in disagreement of how they want it to end, but certainly everybody wants it to end.
Indeed, it's been quite a long saga. So requesting you to stay on with us. Of course, you did address the fact that Trump has invited Netanyahu to the White House again, and we're tracking some developments regarding that. In fact, the Prime Minister's office in Israel has emphasized that US President Donald Trump has extended an invitation to Netanyahu to the White House in the near future. This comes shortly after Trump had stated that Israel should maintain a strong dialogue with Syria. A visit to the White House would mark the Israeli Prime Minister's 5th since Trump returned to office in January. Trump had earlier, in fact, stressed that it was very important that Israel maintain a strong and true dialogue with neighboring Syria, which we know did see a regime change last year itself with the ouster of Bashar al-Assad, and now with President al-Shara at the helm of affairs. Donald Trump has also emphasized that nothing should interfere with Syria's evolution into a prosperous state. Now, Syria does not formally recognize Israel. Israel, of course, has in fact occupied the UN buffer zone as well since December 2024 after Assad's government was ousted. We saw a visit by al-Shara to the White House as well. There have been back-channel talks that are being facilitated by the United States of America to secure some sort of a strategic deal as well. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Gedalia Bloom. of course, interesting developments. We do expect whenever there are meetings taking place at the Oval Office that there might be some big announcement on the cards. We know how Donald Trump really functions. He likes being the focal point of the discussion, of being continuously being viewed as the peace broker, deal maker as well. There have been murmurs regarding a strategic agreement being chalked out for quite a few months, of course. So nothing has really transpired as far as that is concerned. But is an agreement on the anvil?
No, there's absolutely no agreement on the table, and I think that this is illustrated very clearly with the activity of Trump, of inviting Netanyahu back into the Oval Office, and I think it has to do with Trump seeking to keep Israel close on a short leash, because the northern border of Israel on the Syrian side is very, very fragile right now. Al-Jolani does not have control over his own country. It's significantly fragmented, whether it be the Kurdish regions, the Druze regions, the Alawite regions. The ethnic minorities do not want a whole Syria. They are not supportive of Trump's plan, and it's not because they don't. It's not because they oppose the West. It's not because they oppose the United States or Trump's plan in general for peace, but it's his. It's the way that Trump believes that peace is possible in the Middle East. And I'll say this: I think that the West needs to take a different look at the Middle East and understand that it's not just Sunni, Shia, and Jewish, but there's many other tens of millions collectively, 100 million plus ethnic minorities that are in line with Western liberal values, which, when supported and when given them the political capital, I think that they can lead the way in creating a new Middle East of peace rooted in the value systems that I think that would further this peace. So I don't really think that there's a peace plan on the table when it comes to Al-Jolani. I don't think that a leopard could change its spots. I think that although he's looking to moderate, I think the more he moderates, the more his allies are going to go against him. So there's really no win for him. In fact, yesterday a report came out. Israeli intelligence assessed that they believe that an execution is plausible in the case of the presidential leader by factions like ISIS or Al Qaeda.
Indeed, you did mention that a leopard seldom changes its spots. Interesting statement, because we've just seen Al-Shara, he's been giving sound bites as well with his suit and tie. He recently visited Aleppo. He claimed that Aleppo has played a crucial role in the birth of a new Syria. But at the same time, we've been seeing attacks by his own group. On Alawites, on the Druze, on the Kurdish minorities there as well, which some analysts point out that you can wear a suit, but the blood on his hands cannot be washed away. The mindset cannot be expected to be changed in just a few days. Interestingly, the US Embassy in Syria, its tweet declaring a bounty on Al-Shara's head back in 2017, if I'm not wrong, 10 million bounty, that's still up.
No, I think they removed that bounty, but I'll tell you this. I think that even if we want to say that Al-Jolani, I call him Al-Jolani, that's his jihad name. I know that we all want to call him Al-Shara, but let's say this. Even if we want to give him the benefit of the doubt, that he's able to moderate and that he's able to work with the West and he's able to seek to create unity within the historical borders of Syria. I don't think that he has the mandate anymore when it comes to his followers. His followers are steadfast in the jihad. They want to see a caliphate, and I think you see this across the board with politics. If you come with somebody who comes through let me just give an example when it comes to Israeli politics. Everybody talks about Ben Gvir, who is a very far right-wing politician. And I'll tell you this, he will never become more mainstream than he is right now because his mandate, his base of people are the ones that are the most enthusiastic, the most right-wing. Now, if he goes to moderate, if he goes more towards the center, not only is he not going to attract followers from the center because they don't trust him for his past, but he's also going to give up his base because he's going to be looked at as being a sellout. And I think that's the position that Al-Jolani is in. I don't think that there's any future with him as a leader. And I think that goes back to the question: will there ever be a peace agreement? And I'll say absolutely not, because he is not the leader to do so. He may have been a transitional leader. He may have been able to start getting the conversation about Syria becoming more moderate. But I think it's time for him to move over, and that there needs to be somebody who is a true uniter, somebody who does have proper relations with the Alawites, with the Druze, with the Kurds, with other ethnic minorities in the region, who are able to come together and understand that the vision of Syria is more of a federation with autonomous regions that are respectful to ethnic cultures and populations.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, providing your perspective and insights into these developments. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in, this time from Lebanon. We're now learning that Pope Leo XIV greeted cheering crowds in Lebanon while on his way to visit the tomb of Saint Charbel at the monastery of Saint Maroon. Pope Leo XIV is the first US origin Pope. He arrived in Beirut on Sunday from a 4-day visit to Turkey, where he warned that humanity's future was at risk because of the world's unusual number of deadly conflicts. He's meanwhile condemned violence in the name of religion. Speaking in Lebanon, he has acknowledged the country's deep wounds shaped by years of conflict and political turmoil. He's urged young people not to lose hope, telling them that they have time and that enthusiasm to change the course of history is important. Lebanon, which has the largest share of Christians in the Middle East, has been rocked by the spillover of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. There have also been skirmishes between Israel and the terrorist group Hezbollah that has set up its base in Lebanon, that is trying to regroup after its leadership was practically wiped out last year. This has in fact culminated in strikes that are still taking place up until today. Take a look at what the Pope had to say.
Dear young people of Lebanon, peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum. Lebanon's history is interwoven with glorious moments, but it is also marked by deep wounds that are slow to heal. These wounds have causes that transcend national borders and are intertwined with very complex social and political dynamics. Perhaps you regret inheriting a world torn apart by wars and disfigured by social injustice. Yet there is hope, and there is hope within you. You have a gift that many times we adults seem to have lost. You have hope, you have time, you have more time to dream, to plan, and to do good.
With us on the broadcast is Haron Levarko, Israeli journalist, joining us from Netanya. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World as we track these very critical developments. Of course, the Pope earlier wrapped up a visit in Turkey, and he's now nearing the end of his tour in Lebanon as well. His messaging at large has been that of peace in the Middle East. It's notably his first foreign tour as well. In your assessment, what is the larger signaling that the Pope is, attempting at the moment?
Well, yes, obviously it's a mission of peace. Even the previous Pope Francis, it was his lifelong goal to actually visit Lebanon because of its great historical history with Christianity, the spreading of the message of Jesus and Christianity into that region, the Levant. Some people call that area ancient Phoenicia, Tyre, and Sidon. And these places are mentioned frequently in the Bible, both the Old and the New Testaments. So it's a very historical, important visit. And the people there, especially the Christians, which are approximately 30% of the population in Lebanon, this would absolutely raise their spirits. It's an act of solidarity, showing the Christians there, all the different Christian denominations, whether it be Catholic, Maronite, Orthodox, and even Protestant, that they are not forgotten, that they are being thought of. And it's a big step for the Pope to go there, especially because it's war-torn. There are risks involved. The question, one of the questions is it trying to extend a message to Hezbollah? Now, let's not forget that the visit of the Pope was on the initiative of the president of Lebanon, President Joseph Aoun, and he initiated it. And he is under a lot of pressure because, as you mentioned, even though the majority of the leaders of Hezbollah were wiped out about a year ago, they have rearmed, they have recovered, and they are causing a lot of problems, not only to Israel, but to the Christians and to the ethnic minority groups that live in Lebanon, the Alawites, the Druze, and other Christian denominations. So the fact that the president invited him, there's probably a political move, maybe even a military strategy to put pressure. The fact that the Pope is American and that Donald Trump has Catholic background, there could be a strategy to somehow get the president of the United States more involved in the dismantling and breaking up of Hezbollah, who are really, they are not the government of Lebanon, but they really rule the streets and put a lot of fear into the people. So it'll be interesting to see the outcome of what happens when the Pope leaves. Word on the streets here in Israel is that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are ready to strike at Hezbollah, who are causing major problems.
Indeed, we have seen such strikes take place recently as well. It's not gone down quite well with President Aoun, as you've pointed out. There's not much headway, happening as far as the peace process is concerned. We'd earlier even seen statements by Tom Barak, who is US's special envoy to Syria with Lebanese origins himself. He branded Lebanon as a failed state. Do you concur with his assessment?
Well, I don't know exactly what he meant by that. There's a few different interpretations to what he means. However, it's very clear, very obvious that Hezbollah are breaking every single part of the ceasefire. They are not holding a truce at all. And because of that, that in a way is a mockery of Donald Trump and his peace plan, and it's a threat to the peace plan. And so Donald Trump is giving Israel the green light to act. But yes, the president of Lebanon is in a very tight, difficult situation because he doesn't want to come across as a supporter of Israel, but on the other hand, He certainly doesn't want Hezbollah to threaten his government and stability and the people of Lebanon. So he's in a very tough place. So by bringing the Pope, perhaps that is his main goal here, to try and politicize it and maybe reach the ears of Donald Trump. And that's why I say it'll be interesting to see the outcome of this visit.
Absolutely, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other very crucial developments. We're now learning that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called the recent attacks on commercial ships in the Black Sea as unacceptable. He's further issued warnings to all related parties after an unmanned vessel struck a tanker of Turkey's northern coast last Friday. Moreover, Erdogan has noted that such incidents signal a worsening escalation in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Listen in.
Rusya, Ukrayna arasındaki savaşın Karadeniz'deki seyri sefer güvenliğini açıkça tehdit eder boyuta geldiği görülüyor. Cuma günü münhasır ekonomik bölgemizde ticaret gemilerinin hedef alınması endişe verici bir tırmanmayı işaret ediyor. Bilhassa kendi münhasır bölgemizde seyir, can ve çevre emniyetini tehdit eden bu saldırıları hiçbir şekilde mazur göremeyiz. Bu tarz durumlarla ilgili tüm taraflara gerekli uyarılarda bulunuyoruz.
Now, this incident comes amid recent Ukrainian naval drone strikes that hit two sanctioned oil tankers in the Black Sea. Those vessels were identified as the Kairos and Virat. They were then reportedly empty and headed to the Russian port of Novorossiysk to load oil destined for foreign markets. The Turkish president has also stressed that the Russia-Ukraine war has reached a point where it clearly threatens shipping safety, and such attacks on commercial vessels can never be condoned. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Aharon Levako. Interesting development, because we all know Turkey is a member of the NATO, but of course it enjoys ties with Russia as well, a close defense partnership, considering the S-400 deal as well that we're all well aware of, that did not go down well with the Americans. It's trying to strike essentially a balance. Its role has also emerged as a potential mediator. It's been hosting talks in Istanbul between the Ukrainians and Russians as well. In light of all of that, what are Turkey's interests in this particular war and the peace process that is still underway?
Well, Turkey were the leaders of the Ottoman Empire, which lasted for approximately 400 years, 1517 to 1917. And that's a huge amount of history, and their domination of the world, and especially the Middle Eastern area, is something that inspires President Erdogan from Turkey, and he wants to reclaim that title, and in so doing, probably become the leader of the Muslim world. So there is, a high motivation there for President Erdogan, in my opinion, to reignite the Ottoman Empire and to be seen as perhaps the leader of the Arab world. He also has interests in places like Syria, and he's even said a number of times that he wants to rule over Jerusalem as well. These are all areas, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Israel. These are all areas that the Ottoman Empire ruled and dominated for hundreds of years. So he has a big motivation. And to move into places like Syria, he would probably have his eye on some of the natural resources there, like gas and oil. So we certainly here in Israel are keeping our eye on President Erdogan. But I think it's important, as you mentioned, the fact that he is in the east here, and yet he is part of NATO. And it's a kind of a very precarious situation, something that Donald Trump is aware of, because there are nations that have been, especially with the Russia-Ukrainian situation, and according to the rules of NATO, any nation that is attacked, any NATO nation that is attacked, then all other NATO nations must join forces and protect those nations. And that's something that Turkey have brought up. So it's a fragile situation. And I think the message of the Pope is to be careful, to try to keep stability, and not to inflame any political or military tensions, but rather the opposite, to try and work for peace, which, that is a big role of the Pope, to be a peacemaker and to bring a message of peace. And he chose the ancient place of Nicaea, which, according to history, in the year 325, was one of the very first councils of the church, where a lot of the Christian doctrines were codified, and where there were issues regarding splits among the Eastern Church and the Western Church. So I hope that, and we all hope and we all pray, that it brings about some level of peace.
All right, sir, with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your insights and analysis with us on NewsX World today. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to some further developments we're tracking. We're now learning that the US State Department has approved the potential sale of sustainment for F-16 jets and related equipment to Bahrain for an estimated cost of $455 million. As per a statement by the Pentagon, the principal contractors for the sale will be General Electric, Aerospace and Lockheed Martin Aeronautics. This latest approval is part of a long-standing defense relationship between the United States and Bahrain. This also follows prior significant agreements, including a 2017 approval for the sale of 16 new F-16 Block 70 aircrafts and the upgrade of its existing F-16 fleet to the same configuration. The deal is valued at a combined total of over $3.8 billion. On that note, viewers, it's a wrap on Gulf today. We will continue to track all of these updates very, very closely, but we dip into a quick short break.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching NewsX World Report. Now let's take a quick check at the headlines this hour. Hong Kong police arrests 13 people in connection with the last week's deadly fire that killed at least 151 people in a residential complex. Early investigations revealed that substandard building materials contributing to the fire. Death toll from floods and landslides in Indonesia rises to 502. 508 individuals are still missing. Tulip Siddique, the British Labour MP for Hampstead and Highgate, has been sentenced to 2 years in prison by a Bangladesh court over corruption charges related to her aunt, the country's ousted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Amid the ongoing peace talks on ending the Russia-Ukraine war, US President Donald Trump expresses hope, says good chance of reaching a Russia-Ukraine peace deal soon. As Ukrainian delegations wrapped up Ukraine peace talks in the United States, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that talks were productive, but more work is to be done on the truce proposal. At least 3 people have been killed and 8 others have been wounded in a Russian missile strike on the east-central Ukrainian city of Dnipro. The governor has said that emergency crews are working to put out fires and search the rubble for anyone who may still be trapped. Donald Trump confirmed reports of telephonic conversation with Venezuelan leader Maduro. However, Trump did not reveal further details. This call comes amid escalating tension between both the countries. Venezuelan leader accuses the United States of wanting to take over its oil resources. Venezuela has also asked OPEC Plus to show solidarity in the face of what it calls an escalation that could endanger Venezuela oil production. And viewers, let's shift to the top focus story here on NewsX World this hour. Hong Kong authorities are still investigating the city's deadliest fire in decades, which has now claimed at least 151 lives. Police are continuing their search of the 7 towers at Wang Fu Court, finding bodies in stairwells on rooftops as many residents were trapped while trying to escape. Over 40 people are still unaccounted for. Investigations reveal that contractors used substandard materials, including a green mesh on scaffolding, which did not meet fire safety standards. These materials were hidden in hard-to-reach areas to avoid inspection. Authorities are facing challenges in identifying all victims due to the severe damage, with some bodies being reduced to ash. Let's take a look at what Hong Kong police has said.
直至到今日下晝4點鐘，已經證實死亡嘅人數咧係一共為151名。咁而我哋都唔排除咧呢個數字咧可能會上。
Let's now welcome Madhav Nalapit, who's the director of editorial at the Sunday Guardian, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, sir, for joining us here at NewsX World and speaking to us. Now, this is a major tragedy that has unfolded. The death toll in Hong Kong fire incident has now risen to 151. There are multiple issues to be discussed, starting from corruption to the crackdown on dissenters by China, the invoking of the sedition law. How do you see these developments in the wake of the upcoming local election?
Look, I'd like to say that there is a lot of corruption in China, let's be honest, and there are anti-corruption drives there, but those drives are mostly to root out political opponents of the group in power in the Communist Party of China, those who are in a slightly different setup than the members of the group that are loyal to the current leadership led by Xi Jinping. Well, many of them have fallen victim to the corruption cases against them. And the reality is corruption is so pervasive. Almost everybody there is making money because official salaries are a joke. They're so small. You can't afford anything. You can't afford schooling. You can't afford even food. I mean, some reasonably good food on the salary that you get. Even senior civil servants get relatively low salaries. So corruption is widespread, there's no question about it. But the Hong Kong fire is a great tragedy. Our condolences go out to all the people who have died there and all the people who are missing and believed to be dead, as well as our best wishes go to those who are grievously injured. But I'd like to say that unfortunately, corruption is a part of life in China, and this kind of fire cannot be kept hidden. I mean, there are many problems like this that are kept hidden by official media. This is too big to be hidden. And frankly, it just shows what corruption can do, because you have inflammable material that is bamboo, and you're talking about this wire mesh. It cannot be wire, it must be some inflammable material. And I mean, really causing the fire to spread and causing all those terrible deaths. So I think this is something that's too big to hide. And I think it has definitely led to a crisis of confidence in the ability